Hello and bonjour, and welcome to the dreamy town of Dinant in the French-speaking part of Belgium for an incredible story about musical instruments, steam engines, and one of the most famous inventors in Belgian history. This is going to take some explaining. So, this is Dinant, famous for its gorgeous riverside residences, a dramatic clifftop citadel, and a 12th century church tower that I can't help feeling I've seen somewhere before. But Dinant is perhaps most famous as the birthplace of Adolphe Sax, the Belgian musician and inventor who's best known for inventing, would anyone like to guess? The saxophone. Yes, if you take nothing else away from this video, the saxophone is a Belgian invention. And it was invented in the 1840s, nearly 100 years before the jazz music that, I think we can all agree, it was invented for. Although Adolphe himself would have disagreed with that, he thought it was an orchestral instrument. Anyway, the story of Monsieur Sax is one of those that just gets better and better the more you dig into it. So today, we're going to dig into it. Adolphe Sax was born at this address in Dinant on the 6th of November 1814. And as a child, he was, by all accounts, a complete nightmare who gets himself into a string of quite serious accidents. I guess you'd call them saxidents, including falling out of a third-story window, swallowing a pin, drinking a bowl of acid thinking that it was milk, burning himself in a small gunpowder explosion, and hitting his head on a stone and falling into a river. And the list goes on, though I suspect it may have been slightly exaggerated over the years. But either way, it certainly might help to explain some of the ideas he comes up with as an adult. The Sax family actually left Dinant when Adolphe was about a year old and moved to Brussels instead. But the town hasn't let that stop them putting saxophones absolutely everywhere. And while the saxophone is obviously his most iconic and successful invention, or should I say saxessful? No, I definitely shouldn't. He also invented several other instruments. His first ever patent is for an improved version of the bass clarinet, and by improved he means he's made it much louder. His first big success is the sax horn, a similarly improved version of the existing bugle, and then there's the slightly less successful sax tuba, the almost completely forgotten saxo tromba, and of course my personal favourite, the 3-metre tall sax horn bourdon, to this day the largest brass instrument ever made. And he designs this partly just to show off, but mostly because he'd received criticism from some classical musicians that his instruments were too big and too loud. Now, as you may have picked up already, Sax liked his instruments to be loud. The idea for the saxophone itself basically came from him looking at a clarinet and going, "That's great and everything, but what if we made it louder?" However, it wasn't just about making instruments louder. For him, that was the easy bit. What really set Sax's instruments apart was that they produced a quality of sound like nothing else. And don't take my word for it. Here's French composer Hector Berlioz reacting to the saxophone in 1842, using the kind of gushing language French people only normally use when describing their favourite bottle of wine. And at that stage, Sax himself still wasn't happy with it. He spends another 4 years bashing away at the design of the brass body, until finally, in 1846, he hits gold. Well, I mean, brass. Actually, technically woodwind. But let's not get bogged down with musical technicalities right now. We need to talk about steam engines. Because in his lifelong quest for better tones and more volume, Adolphe had one big limitation. He was living in an age before microphones and speakers. So no matter how large his instruments got, they would only ever be as loud as the person blowing into them. Unless you could get something else to blow into them. In 1841, so this is just before he invents the saxophone, Adolphe Sax goes into his workshop and designs something I will carefully pronounce as a giant sax organ. And sadly, his drawings don't seem to have survived, so this is my attempt to recreate the design using some copyright-free images I found on the internet and Microsoft Paint. And as you can see, hopefully, the organ was to be connected to and powered by a steam engine. Until then, most organs needed a human being manually pumping air into them to keep the music going. Sax's design not only solved that problem, it also made the instrument much, much louder. Now, in the original plans, as far as I can tell, there is no intention for the organ to move around. Sax just talks about putting it on top of a hill, like for example this one in Paris, so that the whole city can hear the music. In other words, initially it's just a static steam engine. It's not running around on wheels. In fact, it's probably just built into the body of the organ. However, meanwhile back in Belgium, the early 1840s just happened to be the exact point in history where the country is beginning to build its first railways and tram lines. And every time a company opened a new line, they would try to make a big noise about it to attract attention. Which gives Monsieur Sax another idea. You know what might help them make an even bigger noise? It was a brilliant idea. If the organ was powered by a steam engine anyway, why not power it with a steam locomotive? And then push it down the tracks, blasting the thing at full volume. That way, people across the whole region could hear about the new railway line, whether they wanted to or not. Sadly though, I have to tell you, no railway company ever went ahead with this. And although steam organs do actually become a thing a few years later, Adolf himself scraps the idea completely and goes back to the drawing board, where instead he ends up developing the saxophone. It makes you think though, doesn't it? If the Belgian railways of the 1840s had been willing to spend a little bit more on publicity, we might never have got Ravel's Bolero, the genius of Charlie Parker and John Coltrane, the intro to Baker Street, George Michael's Careless Whisper, the entire musical career of Kenny G, Candy Dulfer, Lisa Simpson, the multi-million-dollar global industry of telephone hold music. And if you'd like to visit Dinant, the home of the original epic sax guy, it's roughly 2 hours by train from Brussels, and the museum is just a short walk from the station. It's only a very small museum, but it's completely free to enter. Speaking of which, a massive thank you to Wendy from the association who run the museum, who recently found herself replying to a random YouTuber asking some extremely unusual questions. And she was instrumental, in putting this story together. The association is currently raising money to restore Adolf Sax's grave, which is not in the best condition at the moment. They've nearly reached their target already, but if you'd like to help them over the top, I'm sure they would appreciate any donations. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.